afternoon, my friends. This is Paul, and today I'm going to be reviewing to you Rayman Legends Definitive Edition for the Nintendo Switch. Now, we as Nintendo owners get Definitive Editions usually before the regular edition, so we don't really have much of a chance to compare the two and see why would they put Definitive in the title. That just seems so big-headed. However, in this case, the changes made to justify that this is the best of the best version, you must get this and totally ignore everything else, are so minor they're hardly even worth mentioning. But I will anyway, just in case this will be your total swaying point. So for starters, in the original game, you could unlock costumes for Rayman and the other playable characters. However, there were a few Mario and Luigi references that were locked behind the Wii U version, and as far as when the game went multi-platform, they had their other exclusives. Now that this is the Definitive Edition, you have every costume from all console versions of Rayman Legends. So you get the Prince of Persia, Splinter Cell, Mario, and Assassin's Creed costumes. The Mario ones you have to unlock, but the competition consoles costumes you get right away, which is really nice, because I really like this Splinter Cell reference, even though I have no idea what Splinter Cell is. You also have the ability to do a Kung Fu tournament, which is basically this game's version of soccer or football, whatever you want to call it. I mean, Kung Fu was in the original game, but it was mostly just like a mini-game that you could do to pass the time and work on your turnip shooting skills. Now you can make a full tournament and apparently play multiplayer. That's not that big of a deal. Also, any levels that involved using Murphy with the gamepad and stylus are now replaced with just pressing the A button or the L and R buttons at the right time to make Murphy do what you need him to do, or by rotating the Switch in its entirety. Any levels in which the character is auto-running and you manipulate Murphy to dictate the character's actions are now in one world known as Murphy's Touch. Now, in my original review, I complained that these were the worst levels in Rayman Legends, because even though this was supposed to be the Wii U title to really show off what the gamepad was capable of, they also ended up being the least fun to play and the hardest to control. When the game just stuck to being a regular old platformer and wasn't trying to do other crazy genres, I ended up enjoying it the most. And this is still a very enjoyable platformer, but it's definitely not for newbies. Now, I know in my original review of Evergate, I said that it was hard, but at least it has the artifacts. Rayman Legends has pretty much nothing. If you're having trouble with these levels, there's not really a helper or super guide or anything like that, apart from a heart that lets you take one extra hit. Whoopee. Thankfully, the game is so non-linear that it lets you play in almost any order you want, and you can actually do the worlds almost entirely out of order. In fact, you don't even need to complete all the worlds. I completed the second to last world thinking, oh boy, I still have one to go, and it turned out that I beat the game without even realizing that I did. So if you're having too much trouble on a level, chances are you can probably skip it. Now, you can get various prizes for the collectibles that you pick up within the levels. And these collectibles range from alternate costumes for the characters to alternate characters altogether. You can even revisit a couple of the levels from this game's prequel, Rayman Origins, now on the Nintendo scene for the first time displayed in HD, because the original Nintendo versions were only on the Wii and 3DS in standard definition. So overall, Rayman Legends is a great game, but Definitive Edition in the title for the Switch version, I don't know, it doesn't seem definitive enough to justify this as the only version. Now, if say I were talking about Dragon Quest XI, yes, that definitely deserves Definitive Edition, as it had an orchestral soundtrack, several quality of life improvements, an entire new game mode where you could play the entirety of the quest in a retro SNES style. Now that is definitive. This, it's like costumes, Kung Fu tournament. I mean, is that really enough to justify purchasing this over the game that was going to be a Wii U launch title? I would say probably not. But if you're also looking to play Rayman Legends wherever you want, then, obviously the Switch version is the way to go. But if that was the case, then why doesn't every Switch port have Definitive Edition? Why did this specifically get the treatment? Name calling aside, I still stand by a lot of opinions that I had in my original Rayman Legends review. I still say that the game looks really gorgeous. It has a nice hand-drawn style, and Ubisoft actually created a really cool engine to enable it to work really well, even on the Wii with Rayman Origins. They have a tool where whatever they draw can be put directly into the game, and then they just have to program it to make it come to life. So everything that you see is actually concept art that they somehow programmed to turn into a game. So I'm normally not a huge fan of these like super cartoony type games. I mean, you probably recall my Wind Waker review and how much I criticized that game. But somehow Rayman Legends makes it work because the animations don't feel too out of place. If anything, they actually give the world a sense of personality that most platformers don't have. The enemies even seem to make up their minds per level about what mood they have. Some of the enemies will sing along to the music. If you're playing the infamous music levels, yes, they're all here, then the enemies will actually dance and appear in patterns to the music. I said that these were the best part of Legends in my original review, and I still stand by that. I also really appreciate the music. Admittedly, it's literally exactly the same as it was on the Wii U, but that's not a bad thing at all. The composer of this game was so intent on making sure that all of the music was performed live by real instruments that he actually created a few instruments if there was one that didn't exist to create his musical vision. Now, there are a handful of songs that aren't fully orchestrated, like the 8-bit renditions of some of the music levels, but for the most part, all of this is live performed, whether you like it or not. If you really like kazoos and didgeridoos in some of your song, there's some vocal tracks, even if they're not singing in any language you would know. There's covers of famous songs, like a didgeridoo version of Eye of the Tiger. There's some orchestra pieces, but don't expect too many long-lasting pieces. I feel like the composer had one big melody in mind, and he just split it in chunks depending on the levels. So if you're looking for something as grand and spectacular as, say, the Gusty Garden Galaxy, you're probably not going to find it. However, what's really cool about Rayman Legends that I wish other games would take into consideration is that instead of the music either looping or restarting when you lose a life, a different part of the orchestra will play so that it feels more, I guess, dynamic. And as a result, it allowed me to appreciate the pieces a lot more than I would have if it was just on an endless loop. Overall, I still give Rayman Legends just as much of a recommendation as I did back then, but I don't think this is the definitive way to play it. If this is the only way you can play Rayman Legends, then you could do far worse. At least they didn't ruin anything from the main game. It still has all of its charms, and it still has all of its gamepad, now switchpad, exclusive moments that are still incredibly frustrating. But some of the frustration has been alleviated by just being able to press the A button. That being said, you should be aware that there's not really any new levels whatsoever. Everything that you've seen here is on the Wii U. The graphics aren't even that much better because the art style is so great that they didn't really need to touch it up. It doesn't seem like the frame rate is too much better, and even though it's still enjoyable, it also doesn't fix any of the problems that the original game had. So, it's still really hard. The touch levels are still kind of annoying. There is still a lot of eyeball poking humor that still disturbs me to this day. And overall, I just think that there could be better ways of making a definitive edition. So with that being said, thank you very much for watching. If I left anything out, please let me know in the comments section. And until the next time, keep the faith, stay epic, God bless, and creators, next time you put definitive edition in a title, make it truly show-stopping compared to the original. Bye-bye!